The Chesapeake Bay, the crown jewel of coastal Virginia, has been utilized as a passageway since the arrival of Native Americans. The Chesapeake Bay Bridge Tunnel connects Virginia Beach to the eastern shore of Virginia. However, the bridge tunnel was not opened to traffic until 1964. Prior to the bridge tunnel, the only way across the bay was by ferry boat. This is the story of the Virginia Ferry Corporation, the reason the Chesapeake Bay Bridge Tunnel was built.
First, to talk about the VSC, we have to go back in time to the early 1880s when the visionary Alexander Cassatt was trying to find a way to bypass rail traffic from Washington and Baltimore that was real congested, like I-95 is today. He envisioned a railroad down the eastern shore of the Delmarva Peninsula to connect up with the ports south of here, Norfolk, Hampton. With 1,100 workers, they built a railroad from Delmarva, Maryland, down to a town to be called Cape Charles. Cape Charles was not here. It included 95 miles of track, had to build a harbor that would contain a rail ferry dock, also docks for a passenger service and freight service that would connect up with Old Point Comfort and Norfolk. At that time, this was all called the New York, Philadelphia, and Norfolk Railroad. It was commonly called to as the Nip and N. And that was the name of the line going up to Delmarva to Cape Charles. In October of 1884, everything was complete, and the first sailing was on a chartered vessel called the Jane Moseley. Jane Moseley did not carry railroad cars. Future vessels would carry the Pullman cars all the way across, and the passengers would stay with the vessel. The Nip and N had a vessel built in 1900 called the SS Pennsylvania. That was followed by the Maryland, SS Maryland, in 1907. And they ran regular trips. It's a 36-mile run from Cape Charles to Norfolk, stopping at Old Point Comfort. And they would discharge and pick up passengers and freight as deemed necessary. In 1912, Harold Foreman of Elizabeth City, North Carolina, wanted to transport his caddy across to Cape Charles. The Nip and N said sure for a price, $17.50. They had to push the car onto the boat. It came over to Cape Charles and had to push the car back off and had to go up the road to get gas to put back into it. That cost today is $437.50 in today's dollars. The cars were getting popular, starting to get popular, and people started to want to transport them across the bay. In 1928, the Nip and N was taken over by the Pennsylvania Railroad. Also in 1928, the Virginia Lee was built, so they had 3 boats. In 1929, the Pennsylvania Railroad opened up a dock in Little Creek, right on the Norfolk, Virginia Beach line. And some visionaries formed the Virginia Ferry Corporation in 1930. And they bought 2 old paddle wheel boats, the Pioneer and the Hercules. They built a dock at the north end of Cape Charles, which was exposed to the elements, and they dug it out. Well, the first trip across on the Pioneer was a disaster. It couldn't get to the dock because the dock had already shoaled and had to return back to Norfolk. These ferries ran from Pine Beach in Norfolk to Cape Charles, which Pine Beach is part of Naval Station Norfolk today, but was the port of call where you caught the ferry to go to Newport News. So with the competition, they started knocking bulkheads out, and they had some restaurants on the lower decks. They knocked those out to try to put as many cars as they could put on these vessels to transport them across to Cape Charles. Haggling became an issue because the ferry dock was so bad or so poor at north end of Cape Charles, they needed to use another dock, and they wanted to use the the Pennsylvania Railroad docks. And they had a lawsuit in to do that. Finally, 1933, that all ended. And the reason I have all this prehistory, because it's actually the foundation for putting the ferry service into Cape Charles. Peninsula Ferry Corporation, Junkin of the Wilson Line, and American Trust and Pennsylvania Railroad decided to form one company and stop the haggling. On 10 January, the stock options were all formed, and it became the Virginia Ferry Corporation. On March 31st, the Pioneer made her last run to Cape Charles, and the Virginia Ferry Corporation was actually born. So the new ferry service the VFC was going to run, their run's going to be from Little Creek to Cape Charles, a 26-mile run. The car floats were used to haul the bigger vehicles, buses, trucks, or whatever. The Maryland or the Pennsylvania was used for carrying cars of that time. They only had about a 7-foot freight deck clearance, so that's about all they could carry. The VFC put in for a contract with Percy and Jones in Wilmington, Delaware, to build the SS Delmarva. Would be their first new build. She was a 260-foot ship. They put another new build in 1935, late 1935, for the SS Princess Anne. And she was launched in 1936. And a unique thing about this vessel was both vessels were designed by George Sharp, the naval architect for Wilson Line. But the superstructure above the vehicle deck was mainly designed by Raymond Loewy, a very famous designer, and one that was called, it said, Designed America. He's a man that designed railroad engines, the Coca-Cola machines, refrigerators, cars. He's well known. Up on the Princess Anne, all these curved lines, which is the middle model here, is his design, the stack of the wheelhouse, and very popular with Marine Engineering magazine and all this stuff. It was the ship of the future. Lehman Garrison of the Delaware, New Jersey Ferry Company, which was also part of the Wilson Line, was the general manager for the VSC as well, so he wore two hats. He was a visionary in trying to get business to his ferry routes. So they came up with a plan with the Tidewater Automobile Association and business owners, and formed the Ocean Highway Association. And their motto was from pines to palms. And it was an effective tool, it worked. Both ferry systems gained by this. And actually, Ocean Highway is still here today, all because of that. So still, the operations couldn't keep up. So they ordered another vessel, the SS Pocahontas. Came on the scene in 1941, and she was the largest. She was larger than the Delmarva Princess Anne, which were the same size. And she came in at 300 feet. During the war, very heavy traffic for sailors, soldiers, and everything going through Norfolk and Hampton. After the war, the need for vessels continued, and the Navy had a lot of surplus ships for sale. So they ended up buying the USS LST 63. She didn't have a name, just had a number. And they took her to Newport News Shipbuilding and converted her into a ferry. In 1949, the company was interested in getting a shorter run, and they went about 8.5 miles down the Delmarva Peninsula to a place called Kiptopeke Beach. Here, they engineered their own harbor. The water was pretty deep offshore, right off the shore, wasn't that far out. And they decided if they could build an artificial harbor, they could build a ferry dock. So they built an 1,800-foot pier out into the water with two ferry docks, one parallel to the shore and the other one perpendicular to the shore. To make a harbor, they bought 9 surplus old concrete ships, 350 foot long. and they towed those up, I believe from what I read, from Florida. Located them. They put 5 to the south and 4 to the north, left an open 600-foot opening in the middle, and you got a harbor. So the ferry started operating out of here, which was, I believe, 21 miles across, and they lessened the run by 20 minutes, so it was an hour and 25 minutes to make the run from Little Creek to Kiptopeke Beach. 1956, the VFC came to a close. The state of Virginia bought it, and it was called the Chesapeake Bay Ferry District Commission. They went by Chesapeake Bay Ferry District by their logo. With the takeover by the state, their first order of business was to try to get another service back to Old Point Comfort. November 1st, 1957, the Hampton Roads Bridge Tunnel opened up. And with that, the Willoughby Spit Old Point Comfort run ceased. So that left a ferry dock that the CBFD could use, Chesapeake Bay Ferry District. They modified the dock, and in February 1958, the Old Point Comfort made her first run. Patronage for that run was so low that they pulled the Old Point Comfort off of it and put the smaller capacity Northampton on the run. It further declined. Then they put the Accomack on the run. Then Hampton cried because it couldn't carry trucks or buses. So they put the Northampton back on the run, and she ran the run until September 1960, when they terminated the route completely. The Chesapeake Bay Bridge Tunnel opened up April 15, 1964, and terminated all the routes. The Pocahontas made the last run, and according to one of the second mate that was aboard, on the way back, they told the captain, let's take her out to Baltimore Channel and come back into Thimble Shoals Channel. And he said, well, they can't fire me. So they took her out on the ocean side of the Chesapeake Bay Bridge Tunnel and sailed her back and came back into Thimble Shoals into Little Creek.
With the opening of the Chesapeake Bay Bridge Tunnel, the 31 years of continuous service by the Virginia Ferry Corporation across the bay came to a close. This is a first in a series of documentaries about the Virginia Ferry Corporation, its people, its passengers, and the boats. Join us on the journey across the bay and time as we explore the experiences of the Virginia Ferry Corporation.